Let me go here even a step further and give another example from cinema which makes this clear. In the Hollywood director, who was, of course, an immigrant from Germany, Ernst Lubitsch, in his film Ninotchka, there is a wonderful joke mentioned there. The hero of the film visits a cafeteria and orders coffee, but he says, "Coffee without cream, please." And the waiter answers, "Sorry, I cannot give you coffee without cream because we run out of cream. But we have milk, so I can only give you coffee without milk." Now, you see the paradox. We have the same, in any case, the guest will get, we have a cup of pure black coffee. But if you order just plain coffee, this can be coffee, plain coffee, this can be coffee without cream, and this can be coffee without milk. It's physically the same, but in its symbolic impact, it's not the same. How? Why not? Let me give you a political example. The first step of feminism is always like, my coffee is coffee without milk. In the sense of, in a traditional society, a woman who is trained to identify with her traditional position in a patriarchal society, a woman simply accepts her position. It's natural for me to work at home, to obey husband, and so on, to be a good wife. Feminism begins when you say, I don't want just to be coffee, I experience my position as coffee without milk. That is to say, there is something which I should have, would like to have, but is not there. And the difference between multiple versions of feminism is how do you define this dimension that is missing? For predominant American Me Too feminism, unfortunately, what the woman is missing is identified in typically upper middle class term. More manager positions, less violations of women's rights, and so on. In Korea, I noticed what women were demanding was much more deeply located in everyday life. Something unimaginable in the United States happened. Women protested for multiple forms of being abused by men. There were big demonstrations against this horrible fashion of men displaying on the web naked photos of their girlfriends, and so on and so on. So again, more radical feminists say, no, we are not women without milk, without legal equality. We want more. We are women without cream. Cream means actual social power, responsibility, better jobs, and so on and so on. And this is what today's feminism, conflicts in feminism are about. They are about the struggle of what women are without today. You, as a feminist, again, feel deprived of things. But what are you deprived of? It's not enough legal equality. You want social power and so on. You want much more. In this sense, we can change the past. The past remains the same. Women were exploited, all that stuff. But what the women were deprived of, so what they demand now, this is open to interpretation. The general lesson, just to conclude, is that the limit, I think, of scientific determinism is that it gets involved in what philosophers call pragmatic contradiction, which means at the level of the object that you analyze, you as a scientist can say, we don't have free will, we are totally determined by natural laws and so on. But scientists argue with arguments for that. They try to convince each other, which means that although they claim there is no free will, in their very scientific debate, they act as if they are free beings. If you are dealing with a person without freedom, you wouldn't argue with that person. Because argumentation means, I think you are free to decide, you listen to arguments, and I will try to convince you. So this is a good philosophical point against natural determinism. Yes, you may be right at the level of content. You give a correct description of our biological reality. But the way we do it implies freedom. You act as free beings. Here, again, even the hardest science displays in how it proceeds freedom. I will talk now about a crucial distinction, I think, politically, between freedom and liberty. Unfortunately, it works only in English. In French, it's liberté, liberty. In German, it's Freiheit, freedom. But I think the distinction between freedom and liberty is very useful. Let me begin with another paradox of freedom. Sometimes the awareness of freedom, the awareness that I have a free choice, is precisely what prevents me from getting free of something. It guarantees that I will not change. The example here, of course, I didn't make a scientific experiment, but I checked with all of my friends, is smoking. Many smokers want to stop smoking. But you know which is the logic of excusing yourself to go on smoking? You tell to yourself, not a problem, I'm free. Anytime I can stop smoking. And you use this as an excuse never to stop smoking. You tell yourself, okay, no problem, I will stop tomorrow at any point I have the chance to stop. So you de facto never stop smoking. And my good friend Alenka Zupancic, a Slovene philosopher, proposed here a wonderful experiment. Let's say you are such a smoker who said, I'm a free being, I can smoke at any point and I can stop at any point that I want, so you use this awareness of a choice never to stop smoking. Alenka Zupancic said, but imagine a situation where somebody would make a choice more radical. Somebody, an authority, would tell you, yes, you are free to choose between smoking and not smoking, but the choice you make will oblige you to the end. That is to say, if you choose going on smoking, you will never be allowed to go back to non-smoking, and vice versa. That would be the real choice. Then you would really have to decide. And I think true freedom would be this more difficult situation, where you don't have the excuse, okay, I will decide tomorrow. You have to take the big decision now, with no chance of undoing it later. This is what happens in wars for freedom, like in Ukraine today. They're not just saying we are doing this today, tomorrow we have another choice. No, their choice is now. They have to decide now forever. Here enters the difference between liberty and freedom. This difference, I think, refers to what the German philosopher Hegel defined as the difference between abstract and concrete freedom. What we mean in our daily language as freedom is what Hegel calls concrete freedom, which means freedom whose contours are determined by the existing space of not only explicit regulations and rules, but especially, even more, unwritten rules. For example, that's why I, in a position which is very problematic for some, that's why I was absolutely for obligatory vaccination. Because, of course, in some abstract sense, you were not free if the state says you must get vaccinated. But a good argument for vaccination is for me that by not getting vaccinated, you limit everyday freedom of other people. You expose them to danger and so on and so on. We are only free within a certain scope of rules. For example, let's say I'm free at the most stupid level. I'm free to go into the city, to walk around, to buy things, whatever. This presupposes that I can expect other people to follow certain rules of decency, that they will not beat me, attack me. This presupposes that everybody recognizes money. And I have normal space of social interaction. Even more important here is that to enjoy this concrete social freedom, I have to obey unwritten rules. Written rules are not enough. I think our freedom only works if me and people around me support, sustain, again, unwritten rules. What do I mean by this? One beautiful example, and there are many others, here in Europe, especially, at least in my own country, is that you have a strange phenomenon of what I called false free choice. For example, let's say that I have more money than you, and I invite you out to dinner. It's clear to both of us that I will pay. But there is a ritual in my country that when the bill arrives, you, my guest, you have to pretend, oh, let us split, let me pay, and so on. It's pure politeness. The worst thing I can do to you is to say, okay, then you pay. I mean, you know, and this is what human culture is. You make an empty offer, we both know that I will pay, but to assert our link and friendship, we have to go through this. So again, an even more radical example is language. We are only free within a language. To think freely means to totally obey the rules of language. Otherwise, you cannot even think. So this is, again, concrete freedom. Here I am radically on the left. The left is right to point out that to be free a whole set of conditions have to be established. Like, to be free, you have to have some kind of a social health care, social welfare, and so on. Without all this, you are formally free, but in reality, you are in total danger, in constant anxiety, and so on, and so on. So this is concrete freedom. Hegel was aware of them, where liberty as concrete freedom, liberty to live the way you want within a social order, that liberty falls apart and you need the more radical freedom to act outside the contours of liberty, as in a situation of social revolt, revolution, war, and so on. Jean-Paul Sartre, the French existentialist, put this in a wonderful way in a text that he wrote at the end of 1944, after France was liberated. Sartre wrote, "Never were we, French people, more free than under the German occupation. We had lost all our rights, and first of all, our right to speak. They, the Germans, insulted us to our faces. And that is why the resistance was a true democracy. For the soldier, as was here superior, the same danger, the same loneliness." So the situation Sartre is describing, it's not of liberty. You were totally controlled by the German people, were liquidated, tortured, abducted, and so on. But in some sense, they were radically free. They had to make the radical choice, risk everything, fight for freedom. And I think the same holds now for Ukraine. They are certainly not living in liberty. Even in the parts which are not yet occupied by the Russian army, they have to obey certain discipline and so on. But since their way of life is at stake, they have to decide radically to choose a side, to fight for their way of life. And this is freedom. Now I come to our today's situation. I think something very strange is happening now. More and more people think that they have to practice radical freedom, which means violating social rules and so on, to retain their liberty. The distinction is no longer clear. What do I mean by this? Think about the attack on Capitol on the 6th of January last year, 2021, when the mob of Trump supporters did something which was an act of freedom. They violated the rules of liberty, of social order. They occupied the Capitol. So they think that the only way to retain their liberty is to exercise freedom. I think that we, humanity, not just the developed world, are entering a new era in which liberal capitalism, as we knew it, is coming to an end. What it is replaced with is what some people call corporate neo-feudalism. It's a problematic term, but there is some truth in it. There is at least one thing about this neo-feudalism that is well known. You remember, now it's already half a year ago, when Mark Zuckerberg announced metaversum. What he proposes is a new social space where we all can communicate, do all the exchanges from dating to business and so on. It's literally a metaverse, no longer our material, vulgar universe, but a virtual space where we are free to play with our identities and so on and so on. But he forgot to add something, that this universe within which we cooperate is privately owned. This is feudalism, and this is neo-feudalism, that the new masters are no longer capitalists who just take the profit, exploit us as common workers. I think we are returning more and more to a period of rent. How did Bill Gates become so wealthy? It's not that he exploits his workers and so on. No, he occupies an almost universal monopoly position. So in order for us to go on with our daily business, collaborating with each other, we pay him a rent by subscribing to Microsoft, one of his programs, by using his software, and so on and so on. So what Marx called commons, the common space within which we interact, gets privatized. And I think the other side of this neo-feudalism is something almost more horrible, I would have said, which is the more and more important role of precarious work. What's the trick of precarious work? It is that you get a false freedom in precarious work, no? Like, look at an Uber driver. He owns his own means of production, he can work whenever he wants, and so on. And although he never can be sure will it last, his work, and so on, he, in a way, acts as an entrepreneur on his or her own. So the paradox is that while he experiences his life as more free than ever, you just work when you want, and so on and so on, his subordination to the existing order is much more total than at any point before. So the great danger today, I think, is not the traditional domination, where, you know, my master is out there. The most dangerous form of unfreedom today is the unfreedom that you experience as freedom. And I think the latest, most dangerous form of this is cryptocurrencies. The idea of cryptocurrencies was, of course, anarchic freedom. We can make money which will not be dependent on any state institutions. It's like direct, transparent exchange. The result of it is total impenetrability. We are more manipulated than ever, and even the very structure of manipulation is not transparent. So this is our predicament today. I almost have a longing for the good old times, which persist up to a point in China, where you know you are not free. My friends from China who are under observation, police tell me, you know you're observed, you look back, there is a secret policeman behind or whatever. But what about something much more horrible? You freely run around on the web, you are totally free, you buy what you want, etc. But you are totally denominated, your freedom is regulated. That's the danger today.